evening, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Just me today, coming to you live from a very chilly Manchester. It's absolutely brass. But what is Sir Jim's plan? We have had updates from the Avengers of the journalistic world, Ben Jacobs, Fabrizio Romano, Sky Caviar. All these guys have come out with huge updates in regard to Sir Jim Ratcliffe's plan. So what are we waiting for? Make sure you get in the comment section, leave a like on the video, and let's dive into this together. So, changes are being made, or at least plans are being drawn up in regards to sporting control at Manchester United. Fabrizio Romano tweeted, in the case of the directors, I expect Man United change very soon once Sir Jim Ratcliffe enters the club. In case of the manager, I think it is different because Eric Ten Hag is really appreciated by all in the club. A source familiar with Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos says if the deal works as described, he will be very hands-on. Ratcliffe is not going to buy a chunk of the club and then sit back and hope it gets better with no change. He's not going to be a passive investor. All good things. Sky Cavi says Ratcliffe wouldn't be spending so much time and money if he didn't feel he could make a real difference on and off the pitch. He's an extremely successful businessman, but it's fair to say his investments in sport haven't always paid off, and I'm definitely going to talk about that. Look, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, it seems like he wants immediate control over sporting decisions, and he's kind of proposing this new structure, with Ineos obviously Ineos representatives, having a huge influence on these matters. The exact nature of this arrangement, I don't think has been defined quite yet. It seems to be quite hands-on, which I really, really like. But then it all falls back to who actually gets the final say. That's the main question here, because it's all good doing all this good work and bringing in all these people, but if you build it all up and then you get to the final point and you're like, right, can we do it? And then Joel Glazer goes, nah, I'm not signing this, lads. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because again, all stems from the top. The big guys make the decisions. Then you look at Sir Jim's time in charge of Nice, and it's not exactly. It's not the best. You know, they're currently second, haven't lost a game yet this season, which is fantastic, which is only just recent form. But his time overall at the club hasn't been great. And I know he's been fairly successful in other kind of entities like cycling and sailing, but football is a different beast. And not only that, Manchester United is probably the toughest job in world football right now, and bringing it back to its former glory. So there's certainly a job on their hands. I think the individuals that have been linked with the job as well are interesting, and the key roles they could have at the top as well is very interesting. Who's going to go? There's going to be a bit of a shake-up at board level. So let's dive into the actual individuals who have been linked with coming into Manchester United. So obviously the most obvious one is Sir Dave Brailsford. Apparently Sky Cavi again said he's going to play a key role at United going forward. Paul Mitchell is another name as well under consideration. Mitchell's just moved back to Manchester and is apparently keen on a move to the Premier League, which is one of the reasons why he finished his contract early at Monaco. And there's been other names mentioned as well around the kind of world of football, but they're the two names they're the two names that I want to focus on just today. So for anyone who doesn't know who Sir Dave Brailsford is, or what his relationship is with Sir Jim Ratcliffe, or what he's done for him in terms of the sporting entities, he's basically been Sir Jim's right-hand man for a good few years now. I think both of them and Ineos will be looking at this as a huge opportunity, because if they get this right, it'll be massive for them in terms of exposure. You know, you look at Manchester United and all the projects they've got their kind of toes dipped in. If United is a huge success, it kind of has that big domino effect on the rest of the projects, doesn't it? So that's obviously going to be massive for him. In terms of his track record, he's helped build a sporting empire, including title sponsorship of the World Tour cycling team, a partnership with Mercedes in Formula One, a sailing team, which is the Grenadiers, I think it is, something like that. And ownership of multiple football teams across Europe, and Africa, and obviously the most standout one being OGC Nice in France. Now, Ratcliffe has already instructed Brailsford to work on plans, opening conversations with best-in-class figures in recruitment, analysis, sports science, and training ground infrastructure, which is nice to hear. But again, it all falls back to the club that's in football now. You can look at all these other kind of projects in sport and they've been really, really good. But the one that he's got in football, or the main one that he's got in football, hasn't done really well up until now. Like I said, they're in form at the minute. They're second in the league. I don't think they've lost a game so far this season. So at the moment, in form, they're doing really, really well. But the start to life wasn't quite like that. You know, there was people, Julian Lawrence, I think his name is, a journalist in France, had described his kind of restructuring of the club as counterproductive and littered with mistakes. Some of the transfers that he brought in as well were described as silly, without logic and failing to make much sense. So that's something to keep in mind. When Sir Dave Brailsworth got asked about the takeover in July, I think he was at the Tour de France, something along the lines of that. He said, it's an ongoing process. We'd very much like to do it, to be custodians of one of the biggest sporting teams, brands in the world, and trying to really support the team and go back to success they deserve. And also the fan base. I've worked in Manchester for a long time. We saw the team become a global phenomenon. Team Sky have done the same. I know Manchester really well. You get the sense of what the club is all about and what the fans want. If we're part of the process, we hope to do that. And I mean, it's obviously a massive, massive job. So let's wait and see how much of an influence this Sir Dave Brailsworth will have, because I think it's going to be huge. We then have one of the more kind of well-known names, and people will know more about him because of his influence in football as well, in Paul Mitchell. And for anyone who doesn't know, he is a former football player, not amazing, he was okay, who carried on a role, I think it was at MK Dons, into their kind of sporting director role. And I think at the time when he was there, he brought in players like Dele Alli, and you had Alan Smith there as well. His core philosophy is only signing players basically that are under 24 years old, so he likes young talent. And then after 2 years at MK Dons, he decides to move over to Southampton. I think Poch was there at the time. He brought in players like Dusan Tadic, Sadio Mane, Yoshida, Nathaniel Klein. So just constantly building this reputation. And then Spurs noticed him. Spurs brought him in, you know, liked what he was doing in football. And during his time at Spurs, brought arguably the greatest Asian football player ever in Son Heung-min. Brought in Kieran Trippier as well, who's obviously a phenomenal talent and still doing really well for Newcastle. Plays like Alderweireld as well. So it's clear to see this guy's got an eye for talent. It's obvious, just off the two teams that I've mentioned there. He then steps down from Spurs, I think early from his contract. I don't know what the reasons were for that, but he chose to work with Leipzig. I think he wanted a little bit more power in terms of what he could do. He overseen the youth development over there and the entire project in general. And I don't even need to mention names when it comes to Leipzig. You know exactly what I'm on about. Some of the talents they've brought through, they are just a conveyor belt for stars in world football. So yeah, Leipzig have a great reputation when it comes to that. And then we go to the most recent club he's at, or was at, in Monaco, where he hasn't been as successful in terms of the players that he's brought through. He's still brought in some relatively good players like Disasi, and I think there's a few others as well. And then just now, he has kind of left his position a year before the contract runs out because he's keen on a return to the Premier League. And I think he's living in Manchester. So that kind of everything falls into place perfectly at the right time. And here we are right now. So you've got a man with a good track record, a good pedigree in Europe, done it at multiple clubs, has great contacts, wants to work in the Premier League, and likes Manchester. So I think if you're ticking everything off a list for what you want in a sporting director, he seems to absolutely fit the bill. And I think a lot of people would be, I don't want to speak for a lot of people, but I personally feel like a lot of people would be happy with Paul Mitchell. But let me know your thoughts on that. So what about the stadium then? Because that's a big talking point at the moment. Apparently Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos are planning to invest in the structure at Manchester United, with Old Trafford and the Carrington training complex facilities being two of the missions. He also wants to expand Old Trafford to a capacity of 90,000 people, which is very interesting. And like I said, this was one of the biggest talking points amongst fans, and one of the biggest reasons why the Glazers decided to look for strategic alternatives almost a year ago in November. Old Trafford, we've said it so many times, it's tired, it's rusting, it's leaking, it's in some dire need of TLC. And as a fan, when you go to the stadium, the experience in general, I mean, aside from the atmosphere, because the atmosphere is absolutely amazing, but the toilets leaky, you get no signal, the food's shit. Like, it's not the experience it should be as a Manchester United fan. I appreciate this, the stadiums in League 2, 3, whatever, that probably are nowhere near up to scratch. But from what the standards that you expect from Manchester United, they just simply do not provide that. In my personal opinion, I don't think Ratcliffe is going to build a brand new stadium. I think he's going to kind of renovate it and make some significant changes to make the experience overall better. Obviously, that's going to be a cheaper alternative as well. And I think with everything that's been highlighted at the moment with the Euro 2028 tournament, where United aren't even hosting any games in that, simply because the stadium is basically shit. And even though we had the biggest capacity domestically, like 74k, we are still not hosting a game. So that's embarrassing on our front. The reasons we give was, we don't know what's going to happen with the stadium, so we can't really do that and all this kind of crap. So, yeah, obviously that's not great on our part. The expansion, like they mentioned, is 90k, so it's interesting. That'll be an extra 15,000 seats in the stadium, which would be filled easily. The atmosphere would obviously increase with that. And I think it'll be the Sir Bobby Charlton stand that gets extended, because I think that's the smallest stand at Old Trafford. But there were some issues with the train line behind it, I think, so I don't know how they're going to get past that. But it seems interesting. It seems really, really interesting. So we're getting closer and closer to this Sir Jim Ratcliffe thing being announced. If it is announced, I know there's a big, massive meeting on Thursday. So if all goes well there, there's expected to be some immediate changes. And the most recent news that's coming out in a minute within the last hour is that John Murtaugh is currently shitting himself because his job is on the line. But if you're bringing in Paul Mitchell, you're bringing in Sir Dave Brailsford and all these guys, I'd much rather have them in position than John Murtaugh. He's had enough time to prove himself. He's been at the club like 8, 9, 10 years or something. So that would be a welcome for me personally. But let's take it step by step. Let's see how this plan comes into action. I think what Gary Neville posted on Twitter the other day and LinkedIn was really, really interesting. And he had like a 16 kind of phase questions. And when it comes to Neville, he obviously knows a lot about football. He's done pretty much every position there is to be done. But he said, 1, what does the distribution of funds look like? Is all the cash being taken out of the club? 2, which Glazers are going, or is it a family dilution? 3, how does it impact the New York Stock Exchange shareholders? 4, does the executive stay the same? 5, does the sporting side stay the same above the manager? 6, can we cut Avram Glazer's hair off? No, I didn't say that. 6, who within the board has sporting control? 7, are there future dilution clauses with the Glazer family in any deal you do as a minority shareholder? When are they? 8, we're maxed out on the credit card and debt. How is this deal going to change the capital structure and the financial issues the club has? 9, is any further debt being placed on the club? 10, is any debt being paid off? 11, how does this deal impact the board composition? 12, how does a minority shareholder impact the negative culture within the entire organisation? 13, Old Trafford is tired and is in need of significant redevelopment. How does this deal resolve the issue? 14, will this deal allow the development of the training ground to its required standard? 15, Old Trafford requires significant investment on its surrounding land. Does this deal impact this requirement positively, or does it leave it as a concrete wasteland? And then the last one, number 16, how does a minority shareholder stop cultural decline across the whole organisation if the people who have overseen this decline still have a majority shareholding? And I think he's covered every possible corner you can there, Gary Neville, obviously, because he owns a football club himself, so he knows what it entails. Obviously, Salford compared to United's a much bigger scale. There's been Cat again. Say hello. Hello. So yeah, I think it's interesting to see if these questions have been answered, on Thursday. And yeah, I suppose let's just see early days how they kind of go into this. What's to be expected? What do you guys want more importantly? What are the main things? Give me 3 things. List 3 main things that you want coming out from this deal that's really, really important to you as a fan. Because we're the most important things in this. We're the reason why the club breathes. We're the reason why the club makes money. We are the heart and soul of this club. So let me know what you really want, whether it's a different sporting director, whether you didn't want Sir Jim Ratcliffe in the first place, whether you wanted Qatar, whatever it is, get your opinions in the comments section and let's talk about it. But yeah, I think we need a conclusion sooner rather than later. The whole takeover drama in general has been, nearly 12 months now. We've been dragged through the mud, left, right, centre, ups, downs. Qatar are winning, Sir Jim's winning, and it seems like it's finally coming to a conclusion now. So there is a silver lining. At least we don't have to talk about the takeover anymore, and we can try and make some positive changes towards the club. But Sir Jim Ratcliffe's got a big job on his hands, alongside with Paul Mitchell if he comes in, and Sir Dave Brailsford. So let's see, or let's hope that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos deliver, because by God, we need it at the moment, and it's been a shit start to the season. So one can only hope. Fingers crossed. Thank you for watching, everybody. Make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, check us out on socials, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.